You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Scarr.
I'm Dave.
I'm still Savage.
And we have come once again to wed, to bed, and to behead the elements of your favourite, least favourite, and somewhat favourite games.
Don't worry, folks, it's all fun and games here. We are back for another Wed, Bed, Behead, and I don't know what episode number this is as we record, because we've been stuffing the locker. But it's been over a year since we did one of these, and of course, I mean, we know you've been clamouring for one. And we're going to, I can't believe we didn't touch on this one before, we're going to do the Wed, Bed, Behead magic on campaign settings. Specifically campaign settings rather than rule sets. Because there's a few places that, editions and all the rest, but I think people understand what campaign settings are. So, just before we came on the show, we each, in a novel twist, because I like novel twists to this format, we each wrote down and posted in our chat the three we were going to talk about, but we haven't said which one we're going to wed, bed, or behead. So,
are you intending a guessing game?
We could play a guessing game, but I guess we're going to go, we'll each do our wed, we'll each do our bed, and we'll each do our behead, and be shocked. Do we want to read them at the start, or do we want to?
No. Let's just crack in.
Well, so the readers can the listeners can play along that way. So the three I've written into the chat that the guys do not know which I'm going to go with are Blades in the Dark, which you've often heard us talk about here, Forgotten Realms, I'm sure you've all encountered it, and Slay Industries, a bit of a darling here between myself and Hida, who isn't on this one. So we'll see what happens.
You're saying two for that one. I'll be covering Dark Sun, Greyhawk, and Eberron. I being the D&D centric fuddy-duddy all of a sudden.
And yeah, I've got a slightly more eclectic list. Mythic Babylon, Star Wars, and Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy.
Okay.
So I got to ask you this just before we start: is Mythic Babylon a written campaign setting, or is it just sort of more of a, as Gygax put it, a milieu? Does it have a rule set attached to it?
As of this year, it is an actual physical book. It's about
awesome.
It's about an inch thick. It's a supplement for the Mithra system, one of the numerous D100 systems. This one produced by the Design Mechanism. And Mythic Babylon, I'll get to that in the appropriate section.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, since we were saving Dave for a thing, do you want me to go first? Or would you like to seize the reins,
go for
Nick?
What's
okay.
No, I seize enough reins as it stands. My stable is full. So we are doing Wed first, right? This is the setting that you could absolutely settle down with.
No, I probably shouldn't start off with the weird meta answer. We can throw that in at the end. I think, I'll go with my great unrequited love of the D&D setting arsenal. I would like to start with Eberron.
Oh.
I'm a third ed baby. I came in. Third ed was brand new. It was this glorious thing, and I stuck with it all the way through to 2006, and a little bit beyond, I believe. And I am biased towards third ed and the things it tried, and the things it failed at, and then the things that it tried harder and became Pathfinder about. But the original setting, well, there was no one remembers Ghost Walk, so we won't worry about that. But everyone remembers Eberron and its robots and its fancy machine guns and all the other stuff that people complained about because it was cool to hate steampunk at the time.
I don't know. Funny, it was nearly on my list. But
I suspect where.
Heartbreaker for me.
It was. I love Eberron, and a lot of that love is because I was there at the start, really buying all the books as they came out, but also because this was when I was in a very blog-ready time of my life, when I was reading up on all the various personalities and thought makers around gaming at the time, which included Mr. Keith Baker, the Hell Cow himself. I think he used to call himself Hell Cow. I remember that being a thing. And basically, I would go from I'm reading the latest Eberron supplement with its many cool and broken prestige classes and ways to add laser guns to your D&D. But then I would also be reading Keith Baker's own personal takes on the setting. And first off, he very much had an attitude of, this is my take on things. If you are a cool creative DM with amazing ideas, go ahead with your stuff. But also he would just give his honest interpretation of what he'd written down and what a whole bunch of other people were adding into the setting as he goes. And it made this whole thing made alive. There was detail everywhere. Even if it wasn't a book, he would give like 2 or 3 crazy theories about what does this thing mean. Oh, it could be in this, it could be in this. It could be this villain, it could be that villain, it could be those heroes. And that sort of added element of, I have the author's personal takes, but also permission from him to take things in my own direction. That really made the setting seem so much more flexible. And honestly, the flexibility of the setting is one of the coolest things about it, is because it builds itself as this sort of 1920s noir-inspired dark detective. It's just after the Great War, everyone's feeling depressed, but also it's regular D&D. You can run off to a dungeon or do things, but like there's this cool balance between all the political intrigue and all of the wacky pulp adventure you can have somewhere else. And you can basically have so many knobs to change the tone, change the type of campaign. Do you want to be dungeon crawl? Do you want political intrigue? Do you want cool, sexy political intrigue or dark, gritty political intrigue? It's just got so many different things, but basically you do your Indiana Jones dots along the map and you're in a completely different genre. You've gone from weird Russian post-war grittiness to bright golden paladin land. You go a little bit further, you go to the murky swamp land full of orcs who are really nice people, but some of them are Cthulhu cultists. And it's just filled with that. Like, everywhere I looked in the setting, there's always something neat that you can use in a different type of campaign. And that's always just, I find I keep going back to this as this thing I really want to just use more.
I also see. I dated. I dated Eberron for quite a while. I'm delighted to see that it ended up with someone who appreciates it for what it is. So yeah, I can totally. I got no argument with you there, brother. That's a good pick for a wed.
Yeah, there's a lot in Eberron. It's not the D&D setting I'm the most familiar with, but what I've seen of it, yeah, there's some good ideas in there. There's a lot you can play around with, as Shane, you've described, and yeah, it's a fine choice.
Although I wonder, is there any trouble in Paradise? Keith Baker is set to announce a new game this year at PAX. So I wonder, is he going to show you the newer, younger model that you might have to ditch Eberron for?
Well, we'll have to see. I suspect Keith's a game designer. He's got to keep designing games. He doesn't own Eberron anymore, as he says, so he has to keep doing things. But he still has a podcast, actually, where he talks about Eberron. So, it's still doing that weird blog thing, but now in cool, new millennial format.
It had a good run, although I think it suffered in terms of support from What's at the time from some absolutely abysmally boring books, which eventually kind of broke me. After I read the Armies of Eberron or something like that.
The Last War, or Forged in the War, I believe it was. There was Forged in the War, and then there was Faiths of Eberron. And when you've gotten to your Faiths book, that maybe you've gone a little far in supplementary. And to be fair, it was late. It was late third ed. There was too many supplements as a rule, so that was the time to burn out if there was.
Faiths of Eberron was particularly badly written. Okay, so that is Scar's Wed.
Okay, Warhammer 40,000 Dark Heresy, and I could have just stopped at 40,000, but this specific out of the RPGs, the Calixis sector setting from the first edition Dark Heresy, that has a special place in my grizzled old heart. It's got a lot in it, like an inordinate number of Inquisitors all doing their Inquisitor things, and waves of acolytes, monsters, cults, so many cults, conspiracies galore, a variety of worlds given, an Imperial sector, is huge. It's a huge block of space. And, it is also linked into the other Fantasy Flight Games RPG settings. So you've got warp routes to Road Traders, Chronos Expanse, or Death Watch's Jericho Reach. But even if you just keep things in the Calixis sector, there's lots of plot threads. The books are chock full of plot threads and cool NPCs. And yeah, I mean, if I had to set a game in one setting, probably be that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've read a lot of Dark Heresy stuff myself. And yeah, Calixis is... Well, 40k has a lot of advantages in that you can very easily have a planet where there's a whole bunch of weird feudal nonsense going on one continent, and then the next continent over, there's a bunch of hive cities with their techno-barbarian, fighting in the pits, and weird nobles going hunting in power armor, and then in orbit there's like space marines fighting Tyranids on the moon or whatever. It has advantages that way, but Fantasy Flight did, I think, make particular care to make sure that every single piece of the Calixis sector had something going on that you could make an entire campaign out of, or you could link together into all kinds of nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing some speculation threads on the old Fantasy Flight forums about different mysteries about what's going on with Erasmus Harlock, that sort of thing, and these would go on for scores of pages, like huge threads, because people got that interested in the setting, and what was going on, what could be going on, what terrible ideas GMs have come up with.
Yeah, and there wasn't just one thing. It was like you have the mysterious dark red sun that comes out of warp and turns the planet mad, and then you would have the mysterious rogue trader Harlock, and over here you would have the Beast House hunting aliens and sneaking them through, and on the side they were bringing in these alien artifacts and that kind of stuff. So every little section had something that you could easily... It's a plot weaver's dream, I guess, this way, which fits because it's about Inquisitors.
Yeah, and it really effectively kind of harnesses one of the coolest places to set, or one of the coolest sort of organizations in which to set a role-playing group, an inquisitorial band. That later on they got the Space Marines and stuff like this, but the Inquisitors are at least quasi-base human and relatable-ish, and can stick their nose into all sorts of different sort of problems, which is always a boon when you're trying to write a campaign and come up with things for your players to do. It can't just be smiting the Xenos every single day of the week. So yeah, Inquisitors get a lot of leeway to do what they want. A pretty good wed.
It's up to you, Savage. Who's got a ring on your finger?
Yeah, funny enough, a lot of similarities between my wed and Decimus's. Can you guess which one it is?
Is it SLA?
It isn't. It's a trick question. It isn't. I went with Decimus.
I was going to say Blades in the Dark because
is
you've brought
Blades
it up more than once on the show.
Blades in the Dark. Why do I think it's similar to Inquisitor? Well, it's about a bunch of kind of roguish specialists who get in over their head, possibly dealing with cults and nobility and corrupt enforcers and all the rest in a nightmare city. And, it could be described in Slay as well. But Blades in the Dark I really like because it is a setting that really sort of boils down a lot of what's in the zeitgeist in terms of, I guess, a kind of a punk fantasy that we've seen through originally things like Dishonored, the computer game series, a lot of Arcane's output, Thief as well. And more recently I watched the first episode of the new, what's it called, the computer game? Not Dota, the other one. League of Legends. It's on Netflix, the one was called Arcane. And it takes place, if you watch the opening sequence alone, it takes place in a world that could definitely be Blades in the Dark. It's a bunch of rogues pulling down heists and trying to get away with their skin intact and as much loot as possible. The setting in... I've forgotten the name of the city, actually.
Duskfall.
Duskfall. So, Fallen London also touches on this stuff. But Blades gives you a really good, interesting... No, it's campaign only. We won't talk about rule set. I'll ring that bell some other day. But the Duskwall campaign setting is effectively post-apocalypse. But the people there have learned kind of to live in the darkness and the ashes of the world before. And it's weird, it's self-contained, it has its own rules. The setting will very quickly sort of clue you into how death works, how magic works, how the demon blood that runs the civilization works. So it has all of these unique little things that set it apart from just, it's another grim and gritty Victoriana urban kind of fantasy. And it is strictly that kind of clockwork punk Victoriana. So it's a nicely contained setting, and the games themselves are contained because you're always running down the clock towards an enforced retirement from a life of crime. So it allows you to spend time in the skin of a character with a bunch of other people who you may or may not get on very well with. It has this sort of vices and stress mechanics borrowed from things like Darkest Dungeon, and all of which is sort of it gets wrapped up. Your characters will either retire into some sort of grace or die trying, and if you're not instantly looking at one of the playbooks to go, could we try this faction instead, or let's be cultists this time, or let's actually try and be the corrupt police enforcers in a world that is even more corrupt. It has lots of facets to explore, very like Dark Heresy. You could approach a game from a lot of different ways. So that's my wed. I'd play that. I'd play a lot of that. I'd run a lot of that.
Yeah, I do think that one of the setting of Duskwall, depending on it goes back and forth whether it's in the harsh Cyrillic or in the more friendly version. But yeah, the setting is actually really cunningly designed to help accentuate the Blades in the Dark systems, because you're in this city and at the edge of the city is a big electric fence, and beyond that electric fence is infinity ghosts.
Yeah,
you're not leaving unless you're desperately tie yourself to the back of an oil tank train full of demon blood that's going to go through the things and be surrounded by vengeful, hungry ghosts. You're stuck in Duskfall, and if that means that you're stuck with 3 gags who all want your blood, that's a problem you're going to have to just settle down and deal with. You're not leaving, Having half the city.
It's a real boon to the GM in that it so clearly defines the setting. Like, as you said, it puts a literal electric fence. And the one side of the city that doesn't have an electric fence has a blood-dark ocean full of demon whales. So best of luck getting it that way. I think it's great. It's very evocative. I think it'll benefit somewhere down the line from a full-color edition, possibly. That... has the budget for really nice artwork. The black and white's good and it's very evocative, but it's very stark, kind of Mike Mignola Hellboy-esque. But it could really benefit from sort of Inquisitor level, Dark Heresy level art direction to really push home just how amazingly cool. Or just go play Dishonored again and kind of drink it in. That's.
I haven't seen the Blades in the Dark book, but the descriptions I've heard of the setting are very appealing. It does sound like it'd be a lot of fun to help play around in.
It's one of the things. It's like one of the biggest marks that people put against Blades in the Dark is that the setting is kind of too good, and it's very difficult if they say, well, I just want to use Blades of the Dark system in my fantasy adventure, but it's so tied to this really cool setting, I feel weird if I just use Blades in Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms or whatever.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of writers who've done hacks of it. Like, the Kickstarter was kind of notable for rolling in a whole bunch of different hacks and rehashes of the system. So it's very mutable in that respect, but let us leave that for readers or for listeners to discover as we move on to our one-night stands, our flings, or as Shane so perfectly put it, those settings you just can't get out of your mind. You don't want to stay there forever, but you keep going back. Mm-hmm. So,
Dave, do you want to go first?
This
left.
For a while now, I've been kind of interested in running a Babylon set game, and I've picked up a few different Babylon, historical Babylon set games, or pseudo-historical or fantasy Babylon. There's a theme, but the one I picked up lately, Mythic Babylon, it's a supplement for the Mithra system by the Design Mechanism, and it's about an inch thick. It's got great art, and it has the authors have done a lot of research and yet pulled in the fantastical elements, but these fantastical elements are drawn from Babylonian myth. It's not just remixed with whatever monster's the flavor of the week. It has the feel of this. If the fantastical was in Babylon, this is what you might have, like this sea serpent with mouths on down the length of its body, like that sort of thing. And it has me wondering. This could be a great one to pull out. I'm not sure if I will run a campaign with this, but I do kind of want to.
So, does it take a stance of being? Is it about brave heroes trying to be the next Gilgamesh, going out and slaying monsters, or is it more politically inclined with you're dealing with the Assyrians or the Egyptians or the Hittites, or the long-lost Mitanni, see our post-apocalypse episode?
It actually, in the themes section, it actually splits between historical themes and mythical. I mean, it does give guidelines, and you don't have to change a lot to make it a completely historical game. You can have those Machiavellian-style politics. You could be merchants, because merchants got into all sorts of trouble, in the area. Mythical themes, you can take a line after Gilgamesh. You can wander down to the Netherworld if you're feeling high level and very brave. There's lots of scope, lots for a GM to get their teeth into. I think my main concern would be getting players who be as enthusiastic about digging into it. But well, no, this is why it's in the bed and not the wed section.
Sometimes food.
Yeah. What about yourself, Mick?
Right. I wrote this list slightly different way, and I've changed my mind. I'm actually going to. I usually change my mind. I'm going to go with for my bed for that one. I just can't stop going back to. I'm actually going to go with Forgotten Realms, which was going to be my behead. But I realized I wasn't being true to myself. I was lying to myself, really, because if we on the one hand, I don't really like Forgotten Realms for a lot of different reasons. I think the meta plot kind of sucks and gets in the way. It's got this kind of, anytime you talk to people of Forgotten Realms, all you'll hear is Elminster and Drizzt and Waterdeep and I played Baldur's Gate, the computer game, and something about giant space hamsters, or giant miniature space hamsters. And yeah, that's true. But I always find myself going back to the Forgotten Realms. While I'm not a big Realms head, I can't tell you the secret histories. It's such a good melting pot of good, interesting fantasy ideas that somehow end up in a very generic setting. But yeah, I'm drunk dialing the Forgotten Realms every so often. I'll always end up in a Forgotten Realms game again. And every time I've played, I mean, it's good to have something kind of familiar that isn't really terribly good for you. You should probably be out there reading more interesting campaign settings or, championing the indies or whatever. But gotta admit, it's a lot of fun running around the Sword Coast or heading for, the Isle of Dread or checking out what the Red Wizards are up to. Or just glomming on that, I also played Baldur's Gate, and I've also been to, is it the Nine Towns up north in Icewind Dale?
Yeah.
It's a rich setting.
Certainly.
It's rich like chocolate cake, and I'm always going to go back and take another bite, even if I'm never going to eat the whole thing. So yeah, for me, it's Forgotten Realms.
Good way to describe it, actually.
If anyone says that the Forgotten Realms is just hopelessly generic all the way through, I would encourage them to take a look at some of Ed Greenwood's writing. Take again, very rich, taken very small doses, but because it's his setting, and he's still breathlessly enthusiastic about it. So long as you can put up with him role playing as Elminster, chewing on the end of his pipe and mocking everyone. He's got a particular gift for injecting these little nubbins of real cool weirdness into any given piece of the setting and giving it more life. Go back to some of his Dragon magazine articles or something he wrote on the Wizards website 10, 20 years ago and look that stuff up, because that's where you get to weird things like there's, I think there's somewhere in some forest there's this just weird floating rock covered in runes, and that could be an adventure, or the house is made entirely out of bones somewhere in the middle of the Sword Coast, and if you talk to the lady in charge the right way, the bones talk to you, and all kinds of anecdotes about little side streets and Waterdeep, and take as a whole, Forgotten Realms is generic fantasy pap, and people have poo-pooed it for decades. But the devil's in the details with this thing, and that's
I think the top level view, it does look very generic, but you can zoom in, and you can zoom in on almost any part of it, and find a wildly baroque, fully fleshed out world that has all these kind of oddities you're describing. Hell, I think every street in Waterdeep has probably been mapped and described at this point, and every single one of them is going to have something on it.
Second ed box sets, man. They put everything in there.
Who's left for
That'd
bed?
be me.
All right.
That'd be me. I would like to talk about my bed. And my bed is the classic, the original. It is Gary Gygax's own Greyhawk. And when I say Gary Gygax's own, that's a total lie. It is the work of basically the entire early TSR scene, including his best friend and great arch nemesis, Dave Arneson, who contributed the Blackmoor setting, the very first subsetting of D&D. Greyhawk is not for everyone. Greyhawk is very much a wacky, eclectic mix of the ideas of a dozen writers, all then filtered through the Gygax barrier and infused with his vision of a coherent setting. And there's stuff in here that's old, stuff in here that's weird, stuff in here that's a little questionable. But this is me coming back as the third ed baby who came in when they were trying for the last hurrah to try to push Greyhawk as the default setting once again, so that the Forgotten Realms could be a special treat again or something. So I was brought in this setting that the Greyhawk was your base state of D&D, not Forgotten Realms, and that kind of stuck with me. And as I've been going over the years, I keep looking back into that old Greyhawk idea, reading about the haphazard way it was made, all the different weird modules, where they are, the politics, the places between them, and of course the early internet flame wars over when they tried updating the setting during the 90s, and everyone hated it. Plot twists, stuff doesn't make sense, and it's just compelling on a weird way. It's something you have to filter. As I say, you don't want to look up what they did with the river people. That was a ill-advised things, and maybe you should probably not poke too hard on the whole Vecna storyline, because that doesn't really work. But this is the original. This is where all of those classic modules were. That you can go to the Tomb of Horrors, look it through the binoculars, and then run away. You can go to the Keep on the Borderlands. That's somewhere in there. You can go to the Lost Caverns of Zolcanth and presumably get horribly killed, because that's a place and a half. You know, and it's got all this history, this weight of years, and the specific touch of this. The thing about Forgotten Realms is that Ed Greenwood had already basically written that before he ever even heard of D&D. It wasn't... Forgotten Realms was his idea of a world, it wasn't his idea of a game world. But Greyhawk is absolutely a game world. In fact, the early version of it was meant to be, we're going to test chainmail. We want to test the fantasy rules for chainmail. I've come up with this place called the Great Kingdom. It's going to have a bunch of little pieces in between it. Everyone fight a war over it. You know, so it was designed from the ground up to be A, a place to put dungeons, B, a place to put war games, and then C, a place to roleplay all the weird politics of. That sort of, you know, design shines through even after 20 years of neglect nearly. You know, even though the last real Greyhawk supplement, I think, came out in 2005. Well, technically Ghosts of Saltmarsh is a Greyhawk supplement, but it's the only thing we've seen in yonks. So my point is, like, you still, even those many years later, I still look at Greyhawk and I see a very gameable setting. This is a thing I can game with, but it also, you know, you can't use it untrammeled. You have to put in the GM work to make your Greyhawk and put in your setting and mutate it a little bit to get the game you want. And so that's why it is a bed for me.
Bed, not a wed. It kind of needed a champion to sort of unify it, didn't it? It needed a Keith Baker to come along in its inception and say, here's how it all connects up. Here's what makes it a world, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we now move on to the spicy end of any wed bed behead, where we start chopping down darlings. I think it's my turn to go first, is it?
Yeah. It's your turn.
Okay, well, I'm sure, given my surprise twist, which no one saw coming, I'm sure you're all wondering how on earth I can behead Slay Industries, which I have lauded more than one occasion on this show.
I am curious.
And it has had recent enough new edition, which has done some work to push the setting along, but it kind of suffers from a lot of what typified campaign settings of its ilk and its era, which is, for anyone who's counting, sometime in the late 90s.
Is it the gritty grimness?
It's not the gritty grimness. I mean, I put Blades in the Dark, which is arguably as grim, if not grittier. I put that up there on a pedestal, put a ring on that one. No, it's the meta story stuff that is endemic in 90s role-playing settings, especially if you plan on releasing a bunch of books. So, here's the problem. Unlike, say, something like a kind of a close bedfellow World of Darkness, which supported its setting and its ongoing meta story with tons of books and lots of factions to play, and kind of fleshed out the world that way, Slay, for a variety of reasons, I mean, it was an indie darling before indie darlings were a thing, but it purported to be a world as big as 40k, with a cast of characters as big as the Emperor and Sanguinius and Horus, Lupercal, and all of that. But it never had the release schedule to really help to flesh the world out, and it never really got beyond its core list of characters, which are basically characters in a Brazilian soap opera. They're all kind of intertwined in each other's personal lives, and the few books that you get in core Slay back in the day, you don't get to see enough of that to really care. They're just a bit of a shadow that hangs over the setting. Now, I mean, the very good books released for it that did lots to flesh out a lot of the superficial stuff in the world, like the sort of entertainment and the various ways that characters could make money through the Karma book and the Cannibal Sector books, things like that. But it was a big setting that didn't have enough ink splashed on the page to really get you beyond this feels cool. And it had a meta story that didn't have enough ink splashed on the page or books pushed out to really make you feel like it was moving on. And ultimately, it needs a beheading the way that someone needs to kill the king. Mr. Slayer has sat at the top of Slay Industries through the entire sort of arc of the game, and at this stage it kind of feels just a little bit stale. The world keeps getting reinvented, but it's always Mr. Slayer on top, and it's always the players on the bottom, and there's nothing. I mean, it's consistent with that at least, but yeah, it gets beheaded for me.
Alright, you think Mr. Slayer needs to get chopped up in little bits and mailed to a dozen different planets?
Well, and who knows what would happen after that? Because I bet he's got a contingency plan for that. I'll give him that credit.
Are we talking about him as like he's Dunkelzad with his big will of absolute chicanery?
Oh, like what? Like you guaranteed there's a heart monitor on Mr. Slayer that should, for some reason, it ever stop beating, the charges go off. Like you thought Cannibal Sector 1 was bad. The whole world is coming down.
I could see it.
Okay. Who's on the chopping block?
I think it's me next. I'm going to make some enemies, I think, with this one, but that's the point of these episodes, isn't it?
Absolutely.
For my chopping block, I would like to drag forth Dark Sun. Blistered in the sun and dying of thirst, I want to put this damn thing out of its misery. Dark Sun, on the surface, is a really cool setting. This is my SLA rant. Dark Sun is this thing where magic is anathema. Magic is forbidden but yet so evocatively powerful. And in response, people have begun evolving crazy psychic powers, each individual with their own talent. It's a harsh setting that forces all kinds of compromise to survive. It's a setting where the Dragon Kings, these lich-like people channeling the power of a dark god, maybe the only way to truly have civilization. It's a place where hidden in the mountains or secret jungles with the last drops of water, defended by hordes of pterodactyl men, or there's a great sea in the middle of the desert where the dust is so fine that you can surf across it on a sailboat. It has all these things. It has metaplot. It has ways to develop a setting, ways to things out. And every time I've played it, it's just turned into you made a mistake. I guess you die of thirst now. Because there's something about Dark Sun that turns on the killer GM brain and refuses to let the players actually engage with the cool parts of the setting, instead falling back onto this endless array of, it's really harsh. This is the harsh one. Let's just have harsh things happen. And I don't know what it is, but it keeps happening. Every time I see Dark Sun being played, it's always on about, water's really tight. Better stab someone, drink their blood. It's just like, but I want to have cool psychic duels with a bunch of cannibal halflings. I want to, fight a bunch of paladins on the roof of a desert city, to try to get away and surf across the sands. I want to be on the back of a great elephant thingy, dinosaur shooting arrows at passing elves who run so fast that they can jump over quicksand. Like, where's the cool? Where's all this cool stuff in the setting? And all the GMs ever focus on is better. You guys better ration your water. Oh, you have 57 starving innocents with you for some reason. Oh, better start picking which ones get to die. And I'm just like, what is this? What is happening? Why can't we just, have a cool D&D adventure in a cool place with cool deserts and cool psychic monsters and everyone is wearing thongs? What happened to that? Why do we have to go through this joyless slog of slow degrading madness as everyone dies of thirst?
I'm kind of stunned because you've changed my mind about Dark Sun and made me want to play it more. Because I think you're kind of right. I think you're very right, in fact. It's the harshness is kind of, it could be made into a mechanical feature, sure. But you're right that if you let it get in the way of actually doing the cool stuff in the setting, then, exploring the crap sackiness of it isn't actually that much fun.
You can have lots of crap sackiness. The entire world has been taken over by mad dragon kings. That's crap sacky. You don't need to also before you see a single Templar, you're going to die in the desert. That's my problem.
Yeah, that's very.
Can I maybe
very, very
die
true.
for being psychically blasted by a dozen angry paladins of the Nazi dragons? That sounds like a better way to go out.
If you got to pick away, yeah. That's very good. That's wow. I'm kind of. I'm reevaluating now.
And honestly, I've seen a lot of the same sort of behavior in Dark Sun campaigns where GMs are really emphasizing the you are on the verge of death at any given moment, malarkey. But I think there is great campaigns there, like the sword and sorcery elements, gladiatorial fights, and lost temples and all that jazz. But yeah, the harsh survivalism, I think, would need to be kept. I hesitate to say in check, but it shouldn't be the entirety of the experience.
Yeah.
So I can get where you're coming from on that.
You want it to feel like a place that is distinctly dangerous, and the stakes can be raised by factoring in scarcity. But you do want to have that kind of John Carpenter Mars, where you visit weird and wonderful places and fight very deadly, strange people.
I think that would be the way to go for it. If you're going to attempt to save it, which is too late, it's already gone on chopping block. Too bad.
All right, well, for the final execution of the evening then, we must turn to you, Dave.
If Shane's choice was controversial, mine is probably downright
It's not
sacrilegious.
controversial. It would have been 5 years ago.
This is,
Star
mixed
Wars.
feelings. All Star Wars, like all of Star Wars.
Yep.
Fine, go ahead. Commit genocide.
Yeah. Like I suppose I came to Star Wars a bit late, in my 20s. I like the original trilogy, like, as films, but and bits and pieces of the extended universe, like the Knights of the Old Republic computer games, great fun, even if they do need patches. But the setting as a whole, I don't know, it doesn't have quite the hold on my imagination that, as for an RPG, that so many other settings do. Like there's cool elements like the lightsabers, the Jedi, the trade smugglers. I don't know. It just, like, a lot of those elements I could see it in other setting. I mean, obviously one's inspired by Star Wars, and they were better in those settings. And I'm not sure why it doesn't quite hang together for me in terms of an RPG.
I can suggest theories.
Yeah, because we're looking at this from a campaign setting point of view. I mean, it offers a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I perhaps it's just that, like, my preferences in games clashing with it. I suppose I tend to like my sci-fi a little bit on the grittier side than Star Wars tends to go for. Not that Star Wars is entirely bright and shiny, but
yeah, Star Wars can get dark, but also it has a very particular structure that I'm not sure is as perfect a fit for RPGs as people immediately think. It actually came up in I think it was like a year or two ago, brought up by Heat Owen. One of the big things that happens in every Star Wars, or basically every Star Wars movie, is that the good guys get captured and then have to figure out how to turn the tables on their captors. And then big reversal. Yeah, it's part of a general cycle. Is that Star Wars as a set of plots is very much about reversals, sudden twists. The good guys look like they're winning, and then suddenly the bad guys do some dastardly trick and regain initiative and capture them, and then they have to figure out a cool way to break out of their certain doom and turn the things back in their other captors. And it turns out that doing it this way actually allows them to win in this later fight, and it's good for plotting in a movie. For an RPG, that kind of thinking seems very contrived, particularly if you're forcing the players to accept capture, every other session.
Good luck.
Yeah.
See previous episodes. Yeah. Well, look, that is your choice, Dave. Bold play, Cotton. Let's see how this works out from folks. You know where to find them in the Discord. Well, look. Now I think we've each laid our souls bare here. We've shown our cards. And we've talked about past conquests.
Can we
but if
maybe mention
like
just one other campaign setting that...
a surprise contender. Go on.
Well, I did sort of promise the big meta answer.
Oh, yeah.
And,
that thing you said at the start is paying off.
Setups. At the end of the day, I suspect for a lot of players, for a lot of people, for a lot of GMs, frustrated novelists or whatever... The ultimate campaign setting, the one that you love, the one that you keep going back to, and the one that you hate every so often, is probably going to be the campaign setting that you come up with yourself. I know I have my own personal baby campaign setting that puts me through no end of anguish on a regular basis as I watch it destroy the plot I put onto it, or be destroyed by players who just can't stop lighting fires and all these fuses that I left lying around. But I think, that, you're always going to have that one to come back to again and again. Love and hate, with love and hate, is the camping setting in your own head. Have I broken the formula?
Yeah, you've got us to the real friends of the friends you made along the way. But no, I agree. That's horribly pat and somewhat appropriate. I feel like we should just cut the recording right here. But that's fair, because every setting that you'll invest a whole bunch of time in is eventually going to have bits, the sexy bits that got you in the door, the stuff you actually fall in love with, and the things you never, ever, ever want to touch again.
And maybe that setting that you've made is actually just, a bunch of Forgotten Realms stuff, but you snuck in the plot from Star Wars and a module from RuneQuest and made them all work somehow. But it's yours, and that, I think, is the most important thing at the end of the day.
Aye.
Okay. Oh, I think we've got to, before Hallmark come for their platitudes, we have got to end this episode. Thanks for joining us, folks, for another Wedbed Behead. Hit us up in the Discord. You'll find links in the show notes. I think if we can't get an entire week's worth of conversation out of finding out what your choices are for campaigns you would wed better behead, then it's probably going to be another year before we do one of these. So with that, this party's over. You've been listening to The Adventuring Party. We're a ragtag collective of desperate souls, striving for truth in a world of tabletop gone mad. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter. You can email us at party@theadventuringparty.net. Although, between you and me, the best place to track us down is Discord. Check the show notes for a link. This podcast released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, which is like free, but with extra steps. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.